Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 13, Rabindranath Tagore. And our topic is Rabindranath Tagore, Critique of Nationalism. Tagore's perception of the dual role, one positive, the spirit of the West, and the other negative, the nation of the West, was the starting point of his analysis of nationalism as it developed in the West. He paid glowing tributes to the achievements of the West in the field of literature and art, which he described as titanic in its uniting power, sweeping the height and the depth of the universe, and also mentioned the presence of outstanding individuals fighting for the cause of humanity. However, behind this beneficence also lay the malefice aspect. Using all her power of greatness for ends which are against the infinite and eternal in man. He attributed this contradiction to the malady of a nation state. The nation which represented the organized self interest of a whole people was also the least human and least spiritual, and the biggest evil in the contemporary world. It was a civilization of power which made it exclusive, vain, and proud. One form of its manifestation was the colonization of people and subjecting them to exploitation and suffering. In this context, Tagore cited the example of Japan, which had secured the benefits of Western civilization to the maximum possible extent without getting dominated by the West. He considered the nation to be nothing else than the organization of politics and commerce. Its emphasis on success made it is a machine that stifled harmony in social life and escaping the end of good life, namely the individual. He mentioned the anarchists who opposed any form of imposition of power over the individual. He rejected the philosophy of a balance of terror on the premise that man's world was a moral one. He denounced communal sectarianism and nationalism and criticized abstract cosmopolitanism. Tagore stood fast on the narrow causeway and did not betray his vision of the difficult truth. He condemned romantic over attachment to the past, what he called the tying of India to the past, like a sacrificial goat tethered to a post. And he accused men who displayed it. They seemed to him reactionary, of not knowing what true political freedom was, pointing out that it is from English thinkers and English books that very notion of political liberty was derived. But against cosmopolitanism, he maintained that the English stood on their own feet, and so must Indian. In 1917, he once more denounced the danger of leaving everything to the unalterable will of the master, be he Brahmin or Englishman. Tagore saw very clearly two clear cut alternatives to the present scenario: one, to continue to fight amongst one another, and second, to locate the true basis of reconciliation and mutual help. This strong denunciation of nationalism was surely hastened by the First World War. In What is a Nation? He analyzed Renan's views and categorically declared imperialism as the logical culmination of a nation, and that race, language, commercial interest, religious unity, and geographical location did not constitute the human essence. In the early years of 20th century, he noted the dangers of narrow religious beliefs and aggressive nationalism at the expense of liberalism and offense. Universalism as an effective substitute, reflected in many of his later writings, including the Gitanjali. Tagore wrote of European dominance of Asia and Africa while dissecting the cause of the First World War. The root cause of the war was the German scramble for colonies and division of the world into the ruler and the ruled. He aptly remarked that when such philosophy was propounded outside Europe, the European did not understand its bitterness, but when they were at the receiving end, they felt the pinch. Germany's action at that time was not a unique one, but a part of the history of European civilization. He also prophesied correctly that the First World War would not be the last one, and that another war was inevitable. The immediate reception of Tagore's criticism of nationalism was a mixed one. The American press was hostile. The Detroit Journal warned the people against such sickly, saccharine mental poison with which Tagore would corrupt the minds of the youth of our great United States. Within India, some of his contemporaries took exception to his remarks. For instance, some members of the Ghadar party mistook his criticism as betrayal of Indian nationalist aspirants. They thought that Tagore, who was knighted by the British a year ago, was a British agent and was sent to United States to discredit India. In Japan, initially he received great ovation as the poet seed from the land of the Buddha, but when in his lectures he warned them against imitating the lust for power of the Western civilization, as well as its worship of the nation state, he was virulently criticized. When he cautioned Japan to follow only the human values of the West, his popularity declined. However, a small number of Japanese intelligentsia became aware of the significance of Tagore's plan. After the war, it came to be known that typed copies of Tagore's nationalism was distributed amongst soldiers on the West Front. There were speculations that this was the work of the European pacifist. A British soldier, Max Poloman, admitted after the war that he left the army forever in 1917 after reading Tagore's work. Roland, in a letter dated August 26, 1919, expressed views similar to that of Tagore's. Tagore characterized the modern age as European because of Europe's leadership in innovation, science and technology, and emphasis on reason. But he was equally conscious of its weaknesses, namely arrogance of power, exploitative and dominating nature, and desire for supremacy. Though the time and context of Tagore formulations has drastically changed, his concern, namely non-acceptance of Eurocentrism and its inability to transmit basic traits of a universal civilization, remain valid even today. Now we want to wind up this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.